Okay, good morning. Welcome to the Camelot Innovation Hour. I'm Harvey Wade. We have a really exciting session today with Mr. Neil Kempston. Thank you for joining us, Neil. Just before I start, I've just got to read a introduction from Sonar. Sonar sponsor this event. And if you haven't heard of Sonar, you should. Because if you're looking for your next insurance partnership, investment, or acquisition, you probably want to talk to Sonar. These guys work with over 50 of the world's largest insurers and reinsurers, helping them to scout, connect with the best-in-class innovation. In addition to their SaaS platform, which tracks 3.5 million companies, they employ a team of researchers who can help you better map the environment, the market, identify new areas for growth, provide insight on who to work with, and accelerate your innovation activities. So to get in touch or take a trial of their platform, free trial of their platform, head to sonar.global. You won't regret it. Okay, thank you for that. And Neil, again, welcome to our session. For those that haven't joined the Innovation Hour before, this is recorded. If you have any questions for Neil, please could you put them into the chat, and I will look to weave them into the conversation as best I can. We have a lot of people that registered for this, so it's half term, so some will not be joining us, enjoying the delights of their children, or maybe the delights of having a holiday. So Neil, welcome to our session. Trying to work out how to move on my slides, which I can't. Here we go. So Neil heads up the incubation underwriting team at Beazley, focused on developing and underwriting new insurance products. The team was founded in 2020. Incubation underwriting has launched breakthrough products for IBF, reputation, usage-based liability, parametric weather solutions, ART, insurance for the crypto industry. Neil's an active member of the Lloyd's Lab, which is where I met Neil, and the innovation community, mentoring startups, insurtechs, and collaborating with other innovation teams in the London market. Neil joined Beazley in 2015 as the data analyst for the broker relations team, and before that, part of Willis. And Neil graduated from actually near me. I'm in Stroud, so near Bristol, in Bristol, with a master's in engineering design, and then naturally moved into insurance, as we all do. So, welcome, Neil, to the session.
Thank you for having me in Stroud, a lovely part of the world.
It is. It is. Well, that's what I think, although it's a tad far from London sometimes. So, Neil, thank you for joining. So, I'm just going to stop presenting. So, Neil, obviously, I've just talked about your sort of potted history, but tell us how you got to here. How are you part of the incubation team? Because obviously, starting with as an engineer and moving into obviously naturally into an incubation underwriting. Tell us that journey. How did that happen?
It is a winding road, and I think it's a little bit of a cliche in the insurance industry for us to all say we fell into it, which I absolutely did. So. As you mentioned, I did an engineering degree at Bristol in engineering design. A core part of that was not initially focusing on all parts of engineering. Well, actually, it was focusing on all parts of engineering. It wasn't focusing on one. So while you can get aerospace engineering, mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, we did everything
right
at a much higher level, and then focused more as we went on. The idea around that course was that we would do holistic thinking, high-level design thinking, and also a lot of project management and presentation skills that would then build that through. We were sponsored by a range of companies local in the area, including the likes of Rolls-Royce and GKN and Babcock, who I worked for on my year in industry, which gave us the opportunity to work in practice while we were studying, which is fascinating. In that year in industry, I worked in the nuclear side and not the energy side of that, obviously. So therefore, there's only so much I can say. And while I found that incredibly interesting and fascinating as an area to look at, I didn't want to work on that sector for the rest of my career. However, I worked on risk management. I worked on lots of different things around project risk and individual technology risk, lots of different things in that respect. And so when I was coming to the end of my my degree, I actually went to my university's career service, and apart from them saying, "Oh God, there's been a global economic crisis. Get anything you can get," they said, have you thought about insurance? Because I'd done my master's project in reliability modeling for complex systems that were modular. And I'd say, well, obviously I haven't thought about insurance. And that's where my path into the industry began. So I applied to a range of graduate schemes and got onto the graduate scheme at Willis, as it was pre-Towers Watson. I worked in the global placement team for just under 4 years there. So came off my graduate scheme and worked as a fully rounded human being, quote unquote, in that division. We worked a lot with insurers, so understanding what was working for them, what wasn't working for them. I led sort of on analytics functions and presenting to those carriers around how we could help for them to sort of succeed more. That then led me into the role I took at Beazley nearly 10 years ago now, which is wild to me that it's been nearly that long. And yeah, I worked in the broker relations team for just over 5 years in an analytics role, doing lots of different things. So working with all of our underwriting teams in all of our locations around the world, with all of our different distribution partners, which was really interesting. Got to be involved on a range of different strategic initiatives internally at Beazley to help transform how we operated as a business. And one of the reasons how I ended up getting the opportunity to look into joining the incubation team was I was part of Beazley has a shadow junior board called the Nexco. I was on the first one of those, okay, which brought me into contact more closely with Rachel Turk, who was our then head of strategy, and reached out to me for the role.
There you go, and here we are.
Yes, excellent.
No, that's really interesting. I think one of the things I think is interesting when I was, got to know you, and then I sort of realized is that actually I would love to understand a bit more about the mandate of the incubation team, but also why incubation and not innovation. Mm-hmm. So why is that?
So there's lots of different models in the insurance market for progressing with innovative new products. So a typical one you'll see is where there's a standalone business unit that is focused and owns the P&L on acquiring and growing new products with a business plan around what that looks like for those metrics. You can get teams that are individually within an organization that then try and support existing underwriting teams to do that themselves. So while they don't themselves have underwriting authority and P&Ls, they support the underwriting teams to do that. And we used to have one of those. And it was really good, but it had too many responsibilities. It was responsible for new product, it was responsible for cultural innovation, it was responsible for technology and operational innovation, and that's a lot of remit. And what Beazley decided to do was actually segment those constituent parts out. So we basically relocated technology and cultural innovation back into our operations and people and culture teams. And then from the product perspective, we split that into two parts. We have product development, which is a function that is particularly focused on supporting teams launch and develop existing products through their business plans. So say, for example, if a team is launching in a new territory, or if they're packaging a set of existing products for a specific niche, that'll be where they get that support. But in terms of looking for things that are outside of Beazley's business plans, so looking for things that are diversifying our product mix and exposure, that was where the incubation team came from. The model is incubation, not innovation, because what the value that we bring to the business is we will hold the effort and P&L for those new products. So we will work on the upfront diligence, the design, but then also the scaling, underwriting, and testing the performance within a sandboxed environment, so that we can make sure that it moves in the right way. We're also empowered to wind things down where they don't work, because from any scientific experiment, not all of them work, and that's completely normal. The VC environment is very much aware of that. We operate in a similar kind of way, where we'll take very informed decisions to look at new products and pursue them towards an intended transition to a stakeholder underwriting team, which is the mechanism by we work. But if they don't work, we can wind them down and protect the teams from that effort, so they can focus on their core markets and their specialisms. That makes sense.
Was that always understood that you would have varying levels of, not everything would be a jackpot winner? Because it's
Absolutely.
not that, although it's sometimes said, oh, don't worry, it's not always completely believed.
I know exactly what you mean, and it's a question all innovation focused teams in the insurance market and probably anywhere get asked, and different industries are probably further down that path than ours may be in the round. You look at a lot of the tech organizations out there, they'll have moonshot divisions as the specific target focal point on the understanding that they will operate in that way. And like I mentioned with VC, they know they're only going to get so many 10x investments out of their mix, and therefore they have to kiss a lot of frogs before they find the prince, so to speak. And it's the similar thing for us.
Right.
However, we will make clearly defined, informed decisions, and we'll have a very strict governance process, as we obviously should, to make sure that those products are properly tested before we start on that journey, because there's only so much resource that we can bring to bear. Therefore, we've got to do it most sensibly. However, we are empowered to make those decisions, and if they don't wind down, we wind them down for the right reasons.
Okay, interesting. Thank you. So, talk to me a little bit more about what is often said. I've done a little bit of work with Beazley, is the Beazley way. How do you spot and progress those opportunities? And if you've got a story you can illustrate that with, I think that'd be fabulous, because not everybody is as excited by innovation process as the two of us are. So.
Yeah, it's a classic thing I have to remind myself is while I get out of bed in the morning, I'm excited to go and work in insurance and sell and create insurance products for our distribution partners to link up with our buyers. Not all buyers are as excited as I am about that process. In terms of how we spot things, there's a range of different ways in which ideas come to Beazley. We'll probably talk about the Lloyd's Lab in a bit, but we get ideas directly from our broker partners. We get ideas from our underwriting teams. We'll look at evolving activities that are out there in the world ourselves. That's where our crypto products came from. We will work with internal and external groups. So we have a horizon scanning group at Beazley that we are contributing part to and look for emerging risks in that respect. Equally, we're part of a range of external groups like the Geneva Association. We are contributors to the Sustainable Markets Initiative, lots of things like that. In terms of that's where they come in, how we choose what we want to work on, there are kind of a range of different things that really make sense. But the crucial two for us to really get excited about idea is not just the market size, so the market potential for this, but also the biodynamic, because you really need to have those two cogs aligned and working together for a product to be sensible. Because you could have a 10 billion opportunity, but no one's that interested in buying that product either right now or ever. So in terms of demand drivers, we see things like regulatory requirements will drive that kind of purchase decision. We've seen that in certain carbon offset compliance markets. We'll see things where our customers will themselves have customers which require certain coverage being in place as well. We've seen that. There will be distinct coverage gaps where other insurance markets have moved away from that cover, where we can bring in something unique. And you asked for an example, and that's where I'll point to one in that last case. So we many years ago, now actually not long after we started the incubation team, had an outreach from an organization called Solar, spelled SOLA, headed by Wesley Pergament. And they were very early in their journey. They had a sort of a scientific paper around what they were trying to do, and were ambitious and looking to do exciting new things. And what excited us about their solution was they were trying to meet a need that was a gap that was forming in the US homeowners market and potentially US small commercial market for coverage in relation to tornadoes. So as insurers were changing the way in which their coverages were structured in traditional markets, there was an opportunity to deliver a sensible solution for buyers. And that was exciting for us because it's a known and clear challenging risk exposure for those that are affected by them. And for us, it's a diversified portfolio. Tornado is like a scalpel, whereas a hurricane is like a mallet. And that means that you can control your aggregation and build a sustainable portfolio. And the product that we settled on was a parametric solution that's driven off National Weather Service weather and survey data that looks at the path of a tornado and the intensity of that tornado along its path. So where we have insured locations that are proximate to that path, they get a structured payout proportional to the intensity, the EF rating, the enhanced Fujita rating as it's known, of that tornado as it crossed the proximity of their property. Now, that's not meant to replace traditional indemnity coverages. It's there to support those affected by tornadoes in the short instance. So it's more of a crisis product, so that you can either start the process to board up your house if you've had an EF0 or an EF1 come through and start to smash up windows and do some damage to your property. Or if it's been more intense, you've got some money very quickly to get your family somewhere safe. And that's the kind of core principle of what we're doing. We're able to get payments to customers in 60 hours or less. It'll vary depending on situations and how it works for the individuals affected. But that's the kind of the target that we aim for, and that's growing really well and really nicely.
Cool. How much did you know about tornadoes before you started that? Because
not a lot.
I didn't know the difference between a tornado and a hurricane, and now I know. I'm like, I'm gonna. So,
I mean, I'd obviously seen Twister, so that's probably as far as my expertise got to. But learned a lot from the solar team, and they'd lived that experience themselves.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating weather pattern that can form, and actually the impact of climate change on them is kind of self-managing to a certain degree, and there's lots of things that are evolving with it over time. But it's a really intense and damaging event when it takes place. From an insurance perspective, obviously fortuitous because they can pop up and appear. The thing that's changing for them at the moment is that they are, instead of just appearing in the traditional what's called tornado alley in the US, they are prevalent in different places, but potentially weaker in some of those as well. So there's more potential buyers for it because there are more people potentially affected by it. And this mechanism is a unique way to bring solutions and support to those affected.
Really interesting. I guess at this point it might be quite interesting to maybe weave Chris's question. But how did you involve other teams in Beazley to test those products, and get that engagement? Because so how did that sort of work? Because you see the opportunity. There's obviously market size. There's a buyer. How does that work in terms of then getting the wider Beazley to kind of give you that involvement, or do you have people that you can pull on? How does that work? Oh, Neil might have gone. You just froze for a minute. Do you want to start again? Whatever you said.
No problem. So in terms of how we work with
is it me? It's me. It's not me. Okay.
Is it me?
You're a bit spotty. I think there's a tornado going over you at the moment, Neil. Oh dear. I can sort of fill the space.
Please do.
Oh, you're just going a bit in and out, Neil. You're freezing a bit, so.
No idea why. I'm sure it's my very well protected Beazley laptop running some sort of protection mechanism to make sure no one's trying to get in. Apologies for that, everyone. The question was on stakeholders, right? So how we work with our internal teams.
Yeah, how you work with those internal teams and how you sort of get them involved to test those products. So
so we always will identify a stakeholder underwriting team that we want to work with, so that we have the ability to pass that product on once we've proven that it can scale and perform in a way that makes sense for their business plan. And we do that very early, but we want to try and do it in a way that is respectful of their priorities and them filling their current business plan.
Yeah.
So the way that we'll typically operate is on a peer review basis. So we will work with them with opportunities that come through to get their view early, but on a light touch basis, which means that from an underwriting perspective, we can start to transition that learning while we're taking on the lion's share of the effort to understand and structure those reviews for those submissions. So it's almost an internal kind of broking type of activity, but without the same kind of broke that a broker would have. So there's that element. The other thing that we try to do is we try to innovate more on product than on process as much as we can. Sometimes we don't have a choice with the types of products that are out there from an innovation perspective, but that means that we try and integrate as closely with existing underwriting and claims processes as much as we can.
Okay.
Now, where there are parametric ones, there are different things for us to go through from a claims perspective.
Yeah.
But in the example I gave, we actually leaned on relationships we already had and brought those to bear to make sense for that solution. So we try and take the learnings that exist within the wider Beazley ecosystem and bring the most relevant parts of those to bear where we deliver and scale those solutions together. And it's a very collaborative environment. I'm very lucky, and there's a reason why I've been here for nearly 10 years at Beazley. It's a very, very collaborative place to work. People like to work on things that aren't immediately directly connected to their day-to-day. That's kind of an expected norm within the organization, which is incredibly helpful for me. But also it means that people are excited to be part of innovative journeys on lots of different things.
Yeah, no, that's. I think that's really interesting. I guess it. I wouldn't say it becomes easy, but it probably becomes a little bit easier. The fact that you've had successes under your belt and people can see that things do work. Probably the first time doing that was probably one of the hardest side of things. So,
absolutely, and it is a constant thing. We're not measured on top line.
Yeah,
that would, for us, the Beazley view of that is that could incentivize the wrong behavior for us.
Well, yeah, you just go safe then, don't you? You just kind of
or risky, right? And we're not a pro-risk organization. We want to make sure that the risks we're taking are insurance risks and not nonsensible ones. And that's kind of a core principle to what we do. And it's why we have the governance structure that we do and the way that we report products up through to our underwriting committee and potentially executive committee for support to sign off. I regularly report to our board to let them know what we're getting on with. So a large amount of internal controls to make sure that we're doing the right thing at the right time.
Oh, good. Cool. So how would you, based on that, what would you define as success and failure within the incubation team?
Good question. I get asked that a lot, mainly because people will see failure as us winding down products. I think realistically, for a team like us, if you're not starting new products and winding down products that haven't performed or scaled, then you're not trying.
Yes.
So for us, we're empowered to do so. Where we wind things down, we do it for exactly the right reason. It might be that the partner's not right. The product may be perfect, the partner's not right. It might be that the timing hasn't been spot on. There might be external market conditions that mean buyers aren't able to put aside the premium pool for a new product that they may see as more luxurious compared to their priority required coverages that may be going through hard market conditions. So that can be a factor at play. But failure for us is kind of really twofold. It's taking on a large number of systemic losses that we haven't seen. That would be not great. But more, it would be losing learning. That would be the biggest failure for us. So if we launch a product which we know people want, which we know could deliver a lot of value, but the timing just isn't right for that solution, to then lose all of the hard work, the wordings we've put together, the rating approaches that we've put together, the kind of the broker and client relationships we've developed over that period of testing that solution, to throw all that away or lose it all, that would be a kind of core failure for us. So being able to reuse the learning that we've had, and it might be that relearning is tweaked into either an existing product, or it might be that it's tweaked to just restart it at exactly the right time. We might have to adjust it and iterate it more distinctly than we did when we first started. So that's the kind of the key. That would be a key failure for me. And key success for us is obviously taking products through our process, saying yes to the ones that align with what we want to do organizationally, and saying no to the ones that aren't the right fit for us, and then progressing those onwards to teams to take forward.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think it's because there's so many reasons why ideas innovations don't work and it's often not your fault. It's brilliant idea, just wrong time, or things just don't work and you've done everything right your side. And I think that's it's the challenge of innovation. It's like you do everything right your side and it just something doesn't work.
I guess what we have to do as innovators is not take that personally. That's hard because you become passionate about the things you want to do well. But you have to look at it like almost like a scientist. I'm lucky I've got a couple in the family which I can basically ask, what do you do when something doesn't work? And they're like, well, move on to the next experiment. And that's the kind of mentality you have to have. You have to make sure that you've gone down the right process to bring it to life, and then you go down the right process to wind it down if that's the right call.
Yeah, absolutely. So how do you share those lessons that you learn, not just with your team because you're kind of naturally learning because you're in it, but with the wider organization? How do you start to talk about that, which can be difficult because people are busy doing lots of things? And so how do those lessons get shared?
Absolutely. I mean, it's you're right, everyone's very busy and there's always a lot of things going on at any one time. But what we do is we communicate very closely with our stakeholder underwriting teams throughout the whole process. So as we're moving towards that position of we're probably going to wind this down for whatever the reason may be, we do that with their consent and support. And then what we'll do is we'll articulate why we do things and why we don't through either internal sessions where we present to our different underwriting functions, whether we're doing that through our intranet site where we're actually going through a process at the moment of updating it with different case studies of things that we're moving on, things that we've wound down and things that we've just started. So we can kind of give that kind of clear articulation of what we do and why we do it. But a lot of the time it's the kind of wider participation we have in the different groups within Beazley articulating what we do, and doing that within both at the kind of the leadership level, but all the way through to the different working groups that define how actions get taken.
Obviously, you're based in the UK, based in near London. How does that work in that global environment? Because how have you learned to kind of get that across? I've worked across lots of different cultures, and Americans, everything's awesome, or not. And then you get some, I once worked in Hungary, and I won't tell you what the guy from Hungary, but they had quite a negative mindset. But it'd be interesting to kind of, and everything in the UK is quite good. So we call everything a 7, don't we? But so what would you? How do you kind of get across those cultural pieces that and share that? Because you've got a very dry English sense of humour, which probably doesn't always translate that well across. So how does that work?
Well, again, I benefit from the type of organisation and the culture that Beazley has and who it attracts. But you're absolutely right; it's a challenge. And for us as Beazley, we're moving to a multi-platform model where we have our kind of wholesale BFL platform, we have our European BDAC platform, and apologies for using internal acronyms, but these are our kind of company entities. And then we have our US platform. So engaging with those groups can be difficult because time zones are challenged. We have obviously our Asian presence in Singapore. And therefore getting those messages across and supporting them is something has been a journey throughout the time since we started, and one we're still going on. So our North American colleagues are very interested in progressing with innovation, and we're supporting their activities. We're contributing towards groups that they're setting up. Our individual business units are setting up innovation programs that we're supporting and helping coach people through the way in which we look at our existing products. The product development team lead on what they're doing with business plans, but what we do is we'll go and provide, I hate to use the word thought leadership, but guidance around how we look at different problem statements and setting those up so that we really get to the root of what we're trying to do with the product. So who is it for? What is the need? And to help focus on that, to help them learn from our decision-making process, which is mostly good. It's not always perfect, but then none is. But we can give some of that learning across to those groups. And you're right, it can be a challenge. But again, I benefit from Beazley being such a collaborative place where people want to work together. They want to lean on the expertise that exists across the business like we do. And my team's expertise is looking at working on new things, taking things from start to on the way to finish. And they might be bringing specialist product expertise, and we can merge those two together to get something quite exciting.
Interesting. Just weaving a question in from the chat, how have you found the impact of the buzzword AI in changing maybe the focus of your team or the way that you work? Have you say what you can on this? Appreciate some things might be a little bit sensitive on it, but how have you seen that? Have you seen that changing how you operate and that impact?
In terms of how we operate, I mean, it's a useful tool for finding out information about new topics. You always have to treat what comes out of those kinds of technologies with a pinch of salt. It can make certain things more efficient, which is true across any organization. But again, you do have to put a human eye onto anything that is produced through it. In terms of the types of solutions that are coming our way, if a pitch doesn't have the acronym AI in there, I will raise an eyebrow, and because they typically all do now, because it's becoming a very prevalent way for insurtechs and startups to scale, because they can use that technology to do things at a pace that startups were unable to do at a kind of a efficiency level that they weren't able to do prior. So we're seeing it more and more. I think from an insurance product perspective, what we've seen a lot and what's been a challenge to date is a lot of the ways in which existing coverage would react to these types of events is within normal bounds of those products.
Yeah.
We haven't really seen a lot of meaningful exclusions across the market. Beazley certainly hasn't yet looked at implementing any kind of exclusion across the product suites that we have to bring those to bear. And as a result, when there are new products that are specifically addressing AI exposure, for us, that's got to be something that we can work with our existing teams around those products that they have already to make sure that whatever they're addressing is a sensible and meaningful and non-systemically exposed risk with a biodynamic. And they can be really specialist in terms of what part of AI they're addressing. The super broad ones can be more challenging because there's so much out there. But we do know that there are more claims coming through across a range of products in that space across the market. So it's an interesting time to be looking at this kind of space. And we have internally an AI exposure working group, which looks at all the different components that could affect that. I sit within that as well. And we provide a lot of thought leadership, or at least redirecting of expertise when it comes into us to those parts of the business where it can be really effective.
Yeah, because I think your focus is around products rather than using AI in terms of the internal processes. So
exactly, and we do have an actuarial analytics function, which is looking at the ways in which we can move faster and smarter as an organization. So looking at ways in which we can use data and technology to be better risk selectors and pricers on the products that we currently trade. And we often will, where we identify those opportunities, we can send them those ways. What it does provide potentially from a product perspective is, depending on the use case, a way to help organizations risk manage. So where there is AI technology that's able to help companies identify and react to risks more quickly, that's a great thing. And I'm a big fan of risk managed solutions and ones that also provide a kind of service component to it, much like our Beazley breach response product and kind of cyber activities that we have through Beazley security. Those kind of tactics where you use a combination of something that will provide a way for an organization to spot issues and where you've got a solution that can support when an issue occurs, I think that's quite a nice setup. So we have seen that in the reputation product that we launched a few years ago. We did have that as part of that. And I'm a big fan of where that can provide a sensible help. And again, the warnings around hallucination are still there. So you've got to make sure it's an informed and well-governed process that uses that kind of technology, but it can help.
Okay. Probably, I think it's from my perspective, it's nice that you've got a scope around this is what we work on. And there's other teams that pick that up, because often when anything, I've certainly worked in teams where anything that was interesting and outside of anybody's got kind of shuffled off to the innovation team. And so that's actually quite nice that you've got that. Does it have a product development output? And if it doesn't, it's not really what we do. And actually that helped you probably being the incubation team and not the innovation team. So
and corporately we learned that with the innovation and product development team we had before, which had that kind of broad remit and that requirement to kind of respond to everything. They did a fantastic job as a team, and they did bring a lot of change and improvement to Beazley. But it meant from a product perspective, our thing is, are we going to be deploying capacity? And is that going to be how do we structure our authorities that we have? Do we need to change them? How do we go through our process internally to get that approved and all that kind of good stuff?
You're far more focused on that business models than actually focused on process innovation. So that's the story kind of starts to make sense, doesn't it? So that's probably great that came up with it. So just wanted to just in the last sort of maybe part of this session is you're part of the Lloyd's environment. You do a lot of coaching of innovators, for example, the Lloyd's Lab. Why do you get involved in the Lloyd's Lab? How does it benefit you and also in Beazley?
So the Lloyd's Lab's been going for quite a long time now, and it's actually was voted as one of the best financial incubators recently. I think it was by the FT, which they should be very proud of. It provides quite a lot of opportunity for us. So we'll see new product opportunities through every cohort. As one of the members of the product launchpad, which is another part of the Lloyd's ecosystem, we contribute towards the process to sort of narrow down the applicants into that. And then from a mentoring perspective, it is a two-way street, right? So we will provide connection, we will provide thought leadership, we'll provide guidance on how to navigate the complex and challenging world of the insurance market to these startups when they're coming through. And particularly from my team, we'll talk around kind of product mechanics and what will make sense for us and what will organizationally insurance companies struggle with. And for us, it provides fantastic learning around new opportunities. It's great for horizon scanning for where there are organizations seeing demand. It's also a fantastic opportunity to collaborate. So any of the startups that go through the incubation Lloyd's Lab approach they go through will be mentored by not just an insurance company, it will be many insurance companies and brokers, so they'll get lots of different viewpoints. And for us, that's also lots of great networking opportunities and the chance to collaborate with other insurers. We've done that in the past where we've taken a solution through from the Lloyd's Lab with a set of other insurers to then go through to launch together on a delegated binder through the Lloyd's cover holder process, where we shared capacity, we shared the design process together, and we collaborated together to bring those kinds of things to market. So that's obviously a core opportunity. It also means that we can direct those types of solutions coming through that are more existing product aligned, or they might be operationally aligned to those different parts of Beazley. Where we see them coming through, we can see where the opportunity might make sense. And it's also a really interesting take on where the rest of the market is looking as well, where you get those kind of different drivers and demands from individuals that represent their organizations and what they're interested in looking at.
I think it's fascinating. I mean, one of the thing we just mentioned before we started the session is innovation needs collaboration, but often when you throw in insurance, it doesn't always collaborate so well. So how do you sort of avoid that, either too many cooks in the kitchen, or I'm just wondering, and I'm not sort of necessarily, how have you learned to collaborate? When you talked about, we're going to work together on this, when we're going to go it alone. I imagine if a really interesting idea comes in from a Lloyd's Lab, almost like, well, everybody wants to do it. But I'm just, how do you sort of work that through in a way that, you don't burn bridges and sort of keep that together? I'm just, what's your approach to it? Because
it's a funny topic, because when I'm boring people at parties, when I talk about insurance, which I'm obviously a bit of a nerd for, I talk about how closely we collaborate with our competitors, which baffles a lot of people outside of the industry. I mean, Lloyd's has a long history of syndication. That's a crucial part of what we do within the market. And one of the things that I've seen over the, nearly 5 years that we've been operating as a team is that there is more investment within insurance companies into teams like mine. So we'll see them popping up, and equally as well within broking houses as well, where resources being dedicated into component divisions that are particularly either as part of their remit or entirely their remit, like ours, to go after new solutions and put them together. And what that means is actually collaboration isn't always that challenging. I think there are a set of particular example leaders in this space of insurance companies that are doing a similar kind of activity to ours, maybe not exactly the same, but similar in principle of trying new things. And it'll often be the case where there are solutions out there where, when we're all as insurers trying to manage our exposure on new stuff by controlling our limits, and buyers need a certain amount of limit for it to be exciting for them, we know we need to work together. And you'll see that through consortia. We did that through, and that was the capacity that came through that was from members of the Lloyd's product launchpad. You'll see it through binders, where you'll have a lead that will lead on the kind of the diligence activity, and then there'll be following markets that will provide capacity with their own diligence and governance processes as well to support that. It might be through a line slip mechanism, which I'm a big fan of when things start getting going. Share activity and share learning nice and quickly and get to scale nice and quickly. I think it's not as challenging to work together. I think one thing that is a problem is where there's only one solution, because one product doesn't make a market. You need a range of solutions. So if you're holding on to your competitive advantage too much, you actually limit it, because then brokers themselves can't distribute it, they can't sell it. So a crucial part for us is actually collaborating with our distribution partners so that they understand the product, so that they can get it to market, so they can actually qualify our view of the demand. Because if you can get a new solution, you can get a broker to work on it, that means that they know that there's something there and that they can take something forward, because the way in which they work on things means that they know that there's scalable opportunity there. And finding the right broker for the types of opportunities that we look at, or brokers, is a crucial compartment of what we do. I would say collaboration. If you're finding the right pockets of activity around the market and the right people, it's actually not as challenging as it may seem.
I guess in a way it's a little bit like a startup looking for funding in some way, isn't it? It's kind of, there's sometimes normally a lead investor, and then there's follow investors, and actually sometimes there can be more than one investor. But when you've talked about finding the right collaboration, I'm not asking you to sort of tell me who's good and who's bad, but what makes a good partner from your perspective? What is the appreciate it's going to be different for maybe different things, but how do you sort of go, I can work with them?
So I think it's, first of all, it's alignment. So where they have an aligned objective to ours. We're a specialty insurance company. Our thing is developing solutions that meet complex needs for a range of buyers around the world, are typically commercial. Say, for example, if the product they're targeting is very much out of kilter with what Beazley wants to do corporately, then that's quite an easy decision. I think there's also the openness to collaboration, but also transparency. Where there are organizations that aren't telling you everything, that's always an immediate, very, very large red flag, and is often the sort of the end of a conversation for us. So transparency is king. If something doesn't work or something isn't working, communicate. Problem solving, that's what we're here to do. I think as well, in terms of partners, it's those that understand the difference between us and an investor. I was actually at a panel yesterday at Lloyd's, and my colleague from Tokyo Marine Kiln, Rob Jarvis, made a good point around how we're like an opposite to a VC fund in terms of how our returns are realized. So a VC fund will invest a small amount, and then that can go to a 10x position. For us, if it goes wrong, we're in the kind of opposite, where we've taken a proportion of the, of our return from the premium. But equally, if we have a large number of claims, the losses can be quite dramatic. So, and that's a really sort of good point. And those that can understand the difference between those two perspectives and the pace at the difference between those two perspectives is really important, because we aren't fast, and we recognize that, and we'd love to be faster. But a large reason for that is if we're deploying capacity on something, we've thought about it quite intensely, quite carefully. It's been through a lot of governance, and it's kind of tolerance for that process and understanding the value of getting capacity, because it's not easy.
When you say you're not pacey, what are you comparing yourself to?
Investors, because that's often where startups will compare us to.
Okay.
Particularly if they're not familiar with the industry, they'll see themselves as getting investment very quickly, and then there'll be a certain amount of runway that'll be running out of time. And for us, our time windows are kind of irrelevant to that. There'll be, if there's a cover holder process, there's a certain amount of time that takes within Lloyd's. If there's our internal governance, if there's a conduct exposure to the product, there are a large number of other gates sensibly that need to go through, because we're the kind of the regulatory controlled organization that is doing a lot of these things. We will make sure that we do the right thing, and as a result, we're going to do it very carefully. It's a very different approach between the two. So I think a recognition of that really helps, but also one that recognizes that the partnerships are long term. That's what we're here to do. While one side of that might be quick to move, we're slow to start, but we're long to stay. That's our kind of approach.
I think it's interesting. I think that's one of the challenges why people talk about fintech, and then insurtech is kind of slow behind, because you've got this. Well, it's not just about making money now; it's about making sure you can make money in the future, because of the long tail nature of insurance. And I think that's what a lot of people don't often understand who are outside the industry.
Okay.
Interesting. This has been fascinating. So we've got a few minutes left, and what I wanted, there's a question actually from Arnold S, who basically said, have you got somewhere where you can share sort of some of your successes of the things that you've done within the incubation team, like some of your, I guess, case studies or something like that? So he was wondering
I think
that's source he could read more about, exciting stuff you've done. So, or maybe we just give him a list.
It's a question for our marketing department of how we want to articulate what we're doing. I mean, a quick rundown of what we're looking at the moment. I think you mentioned it at the start, different types of things that we've launched. So we have some products that respond to exposures in the crypto asset industry. We have a range of parametric solutions that we look at. We've been exploring things in the alternative risk transfer space. We're looking at kind of innovation follow opportunities, where we're looking at consortia and MGA, which are doing niche things, which can provide sort of diversification to our portfolio as well for challenging and exciting new areas. We see lots of different things in the carbon and transition space as well. I think there's a whole range of things. We have 8 live products at the moment. I won't reel them all off. Part of the plan for this year is to transition some of those either into runoff or into the teams themselves to trade forwards, to give us more remit for next year. I think one thing that's fair to say is there's not a shortage of opportunity out there. My sort of oft quoted metric I'll put out there is we see between 1 and 5 new products a week. At varying degrees of maturity or sensible types of solutions. There's a whole range of things, but lots of things to look at that are out there. So while we don't have anything sort of listed publicly, I'm really happy to talk to anyone who'd love to reach out.
There you go. To answer that one. So good. So just looking to sort of tie up this conversation. So for leaders and for innovators listening, what would be your 3 top tips for ensuring that innovation delivers? What would you say?
First one is collaborate externally and internally. You need buy-in from your internal stakeholders. You need trust and transparency from your external collaborators. So I think that's the first one. The second is be comfortable with things not working, but make sure that your process to, take your funnel from all of the things that are out there to the things that are most relevant and exciting for you is sensible, so that you can get through that. But recognize that they're not all going to work, and make sure that all of your stakeholders recognize that they're not always going to work and they're comfortable with that. That would be my other point. And then thirdly, I think it's be willing to try new stuff. You have to be bold and brave and challenge internally. So while you want everyone to collaborate with you and trust you, you have to be willing to sort of say, that's how that was, that's how this is. We did a big piece of work on the crypto asset space, identifying the more challenging exposures and the ones that we could bring existing expertise to. We've done similar activities on the parametric space, where we've looked at different ways that these things can work and make sense for us. So it's being willing to challenge the norm in a collaborative way. I think that's the best way to do it. Is if you're going to hit point one in terms of getting that collaboration, when you're challenging, you've got to bring people on that journey. That's kind of where I would take it to.
Fabulous. Excellent. It's been a great conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Can I add a fourth, Harvey?
Oh, well, challenge the norm. Go for it.
There we go. My fourth is, and we try and do this. If you can't do something, tell someone quickly. That's the other thing. So when we see that number of new opportunities come in, we'll typically say no as soon as we can on the things that we can't do, so that those organisations can move on and speak to someone else.
That's really important, isn't it? Don't keep them hanging on thinking they've got something. This has been fabulous. It's been really interesting. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And thank you for everybody joining. Just before we leave, I just wanted to share the next session that we're going to be having with, hopefully I'm sharing that. Yes, I am. So we have Elvin Turner, who's going to be joining us. I don't know how many, I should have grabbed his book. Be Less Zombie is a fabulous book. If you've not,
I've got it up here if you want me to grab it.
Let's do a bit of a book snap. There we go. Zombie.
There it is.
Although I think mine's actually signed. So.
Oh, show off. Mine
so I have one. I've got one line in this. So I mentioned what in one line. It was a lot more until the editors got hold of it. So, but I know Elvin very well. He's a brilliant guy talking about innovation. He, for those that may not go to innovation conferences, but he was at the Reinvention conference, keynote speaker there. So he's going to be really talking about that. And one of his key things at the moment is really, how do people find the time and the energy to innovate? And how do organizations really get that focus? Alvin's always thinking about those kind of things. So we work very well together. So I think I've put the link in I did try to put the link in here we go. Let me try again. I'll put it in twice. There we go. If you want, there's a registration. So do join if you can. This is just, and then we're going to have a break for July and August. Most people tend to be on holiday, so it's fine. The conversation goes down a bit, and then we're restart in September. But Neil, thank you very much again for your time. It's been a fabulous session. Really, really appreciate it. And thank you everybody else for joining us. You will see a recording at some point if you'd registered. You're here, so you have done, so that recording will come out. And I'm realizing we also have a channel with all the other innovation hours. So this is about number 25. So there's been quite a few out there. Thank you for all your claps as well. Anyway, have a lovely weekend when you get to it, and have a great day today. Thank you, Neil, again for your time, and see you soon. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, everyone.